Chapter 47. Unknown. Bill blinked, momentarily discombobulated to find his legs dangling over the ledge of his own dining room table, his distress prompting a thankfully silent fart as he slid from the tabletop to stand, the polished wood creaking beneath his weight. Poot scurried into the room to sniff his feet suspiciously before rolling over for a tummy rub. "Then where are your flip-flops?" he heard Marci's strident voice demand from the bedroom. His heart leapt. She was so close. He longed to rush to her, but he'd been strictly instructed to leave the past alone until this nonsense with the Sanders was resolved. "I packed them," he heard himself lie, his voice growing louder as the argument moved down the hall. Casting his eyes about for a place to hide, Bill shooed Poot from his side as he tiptoed behind the dining room door, unsure how to proceed without the confusing introduction of a third spouse to the quarrel. Of course he'd side with himself. Boom. Whoosh. Plainview, Texas. Present time. In the quiet of the Sanders living room, Bill quickly notated the coordinates in a small notebook he had produced from his pocket, placing an X beside the chain of numbers on his makeshift log, and then a dash, labeling it Table/Herbert. He'd spent the day frantically searching the Sanders travel history after first observing the couple leave for their respective jobs, before using a credit card to pop the hatch lock of their sliding glass doors up, creeping into their living room where he spent the day hijacking their clock. Those first breathless moments, scared and rushed, he'd run his shaking hands along the top, sides, and bottom of the mantel clock until he found just what Marivel predicted. A small sliding panel that pushed in and to the left, revealing the cold metal of a golden dial in the shape of an infinity symbol. He turned the dial cautiously until he heard a click, and the internal gears of the clock whirring as the dials spun around and around, landing on randomly stored coordinates. Coordinates Bill quickly thought to jot down for later reference. It was almost too easy, Bill decided as he grew lightheaded, a weakness in the design he'd heard Marivel mutter, introducing the subject in France. And though he wasn't as familiar with the Sanders' smaller clock, and couldn't be sure if he'd set the jumps for 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 days, he had to try every one for Marci. Plus, it was a bit like rolling the dice, and Bill found he rather enjoyed the gamble. Boom. Whoosh. Unknown. The throb of insects filled the night air, the slight tang of sulfur riding on the warm breeze. Bill heard the echo of music from the valley nearby and the screech of laughter from a group. This time, instead of the Sanders' magnificent vacation cabin, Bill materialized on the edge of the tropical forest, the volcano in the distance glowing in the dark of the sky. He was back in the Pleistocene for the 3rd time. Centering his senses as the Karankawa taught him, he zeroed in on a terse conversation between a man and a woman in the distance, beyond the tree line, apart from the jubilant voices wafting on the breeze from the valley. He snuck closer, hiding in the shadows of the high moon, pulling his body behind a giant gum tree while angling his head to better eavesdrop. "What the hell are you doing here?" he heard Alice's voice snarl. "I think it's Current Bill, but it could be the other one. It's best I follow him. And if I must, take him out before he tries to stop us," Jim spat, holding his rifle up to where it was visible in the moonlight. Alice gasped. "You think Marci won't notice when a second Jim pops out of the woods and shoots her husband?" she mocked him. "Oh, relax. She doesn't know anything yet. I gotta get," Alice sighed, "do whatever nonsense you're going to do, I guess." "Roger that," Jim saluted, trotting off into the shadows with his rifle. Bill waited until Alice's footfalls faded in one direction, as Jim disappeared into the trees before warily hefting a sturdy fallen branch from the bracken beneath his feet, following Jim as he picked a path through the jungle with a sigh. Jim plodded along, confidently whistling as he walked, before falling silent and positioning himself behind a fallen tree, hunkering down as he watched something in the near distance with interest, while absent-mindedly fitting the rifle with a silencer. As Jim steadied the barrel of the rifle across his forearm, peering into the scope, Bill changed course, sneaking up from Jim's left flank. Over Jim's shoulder, Bill saw Original Bill writhing sensuously upon an impressive pile of leaves, incoherent. A second Bill, his empty pistol drooping in one hand, the other hand reaching up, his fingertips brushing those of a hairy, festive sock-gloved hand, the simian arm outstretched from a branch overhead like a fresco from the Sistine Chapel. Jim cocked the trigger, and without thinking, Bill lunged forward, swinging his branch across the back of Jim's head with a dramatic crack. The rifle discharged with a quiet snap, the bullet whizzing silently over Second Bill's head, pinging with a fluff of detritus into a dead tree. "Hello, me," Bill greeted himself as he stepped over Jim's limp, camo-clad body, stooping to offer First Bill a hand up. That was close. Bill remembered to warn his second incarnation. This asswipe didn't get a very good shot, thankfully. Bending down to check Jim's pulse, Bill added as he scanned the perimeter, "You can't trust him. Did you notice your gun was empty? I wish I could tell you more, but I don't know who's watching or listening these days." Seeing Jim stir, Bill remembered to add, "Go back to where this started and look for the letter from your uncle." Jim moaned as Bill went on, instructing, "I gotta go. Jim's gonna wake up. Just tell him she attacked him. And don't let on that you've seen me. Us. Damn it. This is confusing. Don't tell anyone what I've told you. No one, you understand? Find that note." "What happened?" Jim groaned as Bill sprinted away, never noticing she watched his retreat from her perch above, her gloved hand reaching for him as he fled past her hiding space in the giant magnolia tree. She vowed she would sing a song for this battle man, this god who could reproduce himself at will. There were 3 of him this time. She could count at least that high. He was one to be worshipped, she decided reflectively. She would tell the story of this magical trinity to her children and her children's children. Boom. Whoosh. Plainview, Texas. Present time. Drawing a star beside the string of coordinates, Bill added a dash and the word Pleistocene, misspelled not for the first nor last time. Glancing back at the Sanders clock, he was relieved to find he'd only been gone 2 hours. Time at least for one more trip before anyone was due home. Boom. Whoosh. Unknown. The day's final spin landed Bill in a small, dark, square room filled with shelves of cleaning supplies. Bottles, sprayers, and unidentified janitorial implements poked him as he felt blindly about, searching for a light switch, his hands sliding along the shelves and walls, knocking askew wooden broom handles in buckets that smelled of bleach until he'd located the backside of the door, a locked door he found as he jiggled the knob ineffectually. After putting his ear to the back of the door and hearing nothing of concern, he knocked lightly while clearing his throat. "You okay there, buddy?" The door was thrown open by a jovial, balding man in a 3-piece suit, casually ashing his cigarette into the freestanding ashtray next to the shiny, avocado-green vinyl couch upon which he sat, in what appeared to be some type of a break room, rising and grinding his cigarette out while muttering something about this type of thing happening all the time because of the goddamn locks on all the goddamn doors in the joint, finishing with a wink. "What commie spy is after our toilet paper and pencils, eh?" Momentarily blinded by the bright morning sunlight filtering in from the large industrial windows, Bill blinked in surprise. thinking to grab a box of tissues from the nearest shelf before exiting the supply closet, and, taking a moment to straighten his golf shirt, casually followed his savior into the hallway for a better look around. It was a professional office of some type, the clack of manual typewriters filling the air, the ring of telephones and the rapid cadence of muffled conversations. Teams of suited men in clusters gathered around boardroom tables, walking in hunched groups in deep conversation throughout the hallways, chatting in loud, swelling voices. Women in skirt suits, smiling up from their desks, the scent of cigarette smoke filling the air. People in every corner of the office aggressively puffing away as they walked and talked. Bill wished he'd listened better when Jim spoke of his background. Perhaps someone he knew worked here, wherever here was. Maybe even this mysterious Aunt Penelope, if he was lucky.
"Sir, do you have an appointment?"
He heard a voice inquire from behind. Turning, he was confronted by an agitated secretary waving a pen and notepad in his direction. He opened his mouth to speak, spotting the small but recognizable logo of a rocket on her lapel pin. But as he uttered the name Penelope, he grew faint. Boom. Whoosh. Plainview, Texas. Present time. Hearing the purr of an engine in the drive, the light vibration of the garage door opener engaging, and the clang of the chain lifting the aluminum panels of it with incremental squeals, Bill rushed from the Sanders living room, still clutching his box of tissues, slipping through the sliding glass doors just as the interior lock jiggled and the kitchen door creaked open. Racing home, Bill reviewed his log list for areas of further exploration, deciding this janitor's closet at NASA was a definite candidate. Only the next time, he'd need a brown suit, a flashlight, a bobby pin, and a pack of smokes.